Good afternoon, my forkable friends, and yes, this is a completely useless stack of papers that I'm merely using as a prop. Just put those aside. Doing something a little different today. For starters, I'm sitting down, which is not something I usually do in my videos. Feels a little uncomfortable. And also introducing a new series. Obviously, I have good vegan news, and in the past, I've done vegan headlines that pissed me off. And now, for the first time ever, we're doing vegan headlines that made me say, "What the fork?" When researching for last week's Good Vegan News, there were a ton of positive, amazing stories. If you saw that video, you know that we had a record-breaking number of stories. I think it was like 11 stories in that one video. But there were also a lot of headlines that were really ridiculous and bizarre, to put it mildly. And I wanted to dive into some of those today in an ongoing exploration of how veganism is represented in the media. So let's get right into it, starting with Inside the Zizians, how a cultish crew of radical vegans became linked to killings across the United States. So I came across multiple articles about this topic when researching for Good Vegan News. I told myself I would wait to delve into it until I was done with that video. I didn't want to poison the Good Vegan News waters. But this is an unbelievably bizarre and convoluted story. I have at this point read multiple articles on it, I watched a Natural Vegan's video on it, and I still barely can make sense of it. Part of it is that the story is still very much unfolding. In fact, there was a major development just yesterday. So if I get any details wrong, I apologize, but you will see it's so complex. I felt like that It's Always Sunny pinboard meme, trying to make sense of it. Give it 6 months to a year, and I'm sure HBO Max will have a riveting docuseries on the topic that will go into all of the details. That's not really my goal of today. And for legal reasons, I'll just say all of this is alleged, but this story revolves around a group of people loosely referred to as Zizians, which is a reference to the apparent leader, a trans woman named Ziz, and this group is being described as a cult. There have been 6 murders in the US over the past few years, all linked to members of this group. The group is an offshoot of the Northern California rationalist movement. I honestly can't get too deep into all the ideologies of this group. It gets so convoluted. It gets to a point where I'm like, none of these words make any sense. Here's how the New York Post describes the group: highly educated trans vegan rationalists who hold fringe, esoteric ideological beliefs about transhumanism and animal rights. Of course, my point of interest is the vegan aspect and how that's being represented in the media. Many members of the group seem to be vegan, and Ziz herself wrote about veganism on her blog. And of course, basically all the headlines talking about this group include the fact that this cult is vegan. Like I said, the story is very much unfolding in real time. When I started looking into this a week ago, no one seemed to know where Ziz was, and just yesterday, Ziz was arrested along with 2 other group members. Other members were also previously arrested, but what really concerns me about this and why I wanted to include it is the sensationalism of the vegan aspect, which in some ways I understand that the media and the public love as sensational a story as possible. There are just certain words and certain groups that are just lightning rods for gleeful public scrutiny. And unfortunately, vegan is one, and unfortunately, trans is another. And in my opinion, these are 2 minority groups that are being unfairly associated with this horrific sequence of events. One headline even calls it a trans vegan terror cult, and I can't help but feel like the positioning of all these words together somehow implies causation. Obviously, a lot of people already unfairly accuse veganism of being a cult. I talked about that pretty extensively in the responding to the ex-vegan subreddit video. But yeah, now it seems to be being positioned as like somehow an integral part of the sinister nature of this particular cult. And a comment on Unnatural Vegan's video pointed out that most cults will espouse some sort of value system, almost like to justify bad behavior. Like, we're doing all of this to save the world in some way, so therefore it's okay that we're, doing XYZ, killing people, for example. And I'm not saying that's the reason that the Zizians were vegan, I just thought that was a good point. to keep in mind. Another headline on the topic was Veganism's Worst Poster Child, which discusses one of the members who is currently in jail and dictated an open letter which relays a vegan message. Which is like, yeah, we obviously don't want to be associated with someone charged with murder. But as Unnatural Vegan pointed out, this isn't our poster child. And also, anytime it's been discovered that a murderer ate meat, i.e. most murderers throughout history, do we then call that person the poster child for carnism? And this is National Review, which is a conservative publication, but they end the article with, perhaps vegans should hire a PR assistant and do some damage control. Which, I mean, oh no. Yes? Hi. I heard you needed me. Folks, it's the Forkable PR rep, but honestly, I don't know if this is really the best time for this. I wrote something. No, and I appreciate that. Maybe we'll have you back when the HBO series comes out. Yeah, I think it's just a little too soon. Okay. Okay, yeah, right, we'll call you. All right. Okay, bye. Sorry about that. She's very eager. While the conflation of veganism and the trans community with all the horrible things that have happened bothers me, I'm also admittedly someone who is fascinated by cults and really into watching cult docuseries. So I'd like to reserve the right to hold space for both things, that this is a fascinating story and I will be tuning into the HBO Max series, and also that I'm frustrated by media gleefully glomming on to any opportunity to make vegans look like unhinged, murderous cult members. Like I said, the story is still very much unfolding, but there's a headline that made me say, what the fork? If I ever saw one. But now let's move on to a bit of a lighter one. Her vegan friend got upset that she didn't cook her an entirely separate meal when she threw a little dinner party. Not sure why I'm reading it in the Good Vegan News voice. This is not Good Vegan News, it's What the Fork headlines. Already I love the use of the word little in the headline. All I did was throw a little dinner party. This was on a website called Chip Chick, which I admit I've never heard of in my life. And like with so many controversial vegan articles, this one is centered around a Reddit "Am I the asshole?" post. Last weekend, this woman had a dinner party at her house, and she invited her closest friends to attend. Her friend Alina is vegan, and it's not like she's never known this about her. She did think about Alina's dietary preferences when she planned out what to serve everyone that night. I made a bunch of sides that were totally vegan friendly. Roasted veggies, a salad, some bread, hummus, and stuff like that, she explained. Oh, so you mean a meal of sides? Everyone's favorite thing? Aw, you shouldn't have. But the main dish was a roasted chicken with some pasta on the side, which was also vegan since I used olive oil instead of butter. As it came time to sit down to have dinner, Alina stared down at her plate and then asked what she would be eating. The host responded that everything was vegan except for obviously the chicken, but that just irritated Alina. Alina snapped that the sides didn't make a full meal for her. I consider myself to be a sassy vegan who likes to stand up for her right to eat a full meal with everyone else, but I don't think I've ever snapped at anyone when the offerings weren't up to snuff. Which is, 98% of the dinners I've had at other people's houses. If anything, I think most vegans are so on guard to try not to further negative stereotypes. So I was already feeling a little skeptical of this retelling, and it turned out that snapped was actually a creative interpretation by the author of the article. The original poster on Reddit didn't actually use that word. But yeah, even if she did snap, I kind of get it. You and all the other guests have a main course, an entree, and we're supposed to eat table scraps. Bread, salad, things that are served to you for free at a restaurant in addition to your entree. And look, I'm not saying you can't get reasonably full off of bread, hummus, salad, and roasted veggies. Lord knows I've resentfully eaten all of these things as meals on more occasions than I'd care to count. But let's not pretend that's even a remotely interesting or inspired meal. It's completely low effort. It's barely different from what you would have done if you had a whole dinner party full of meat eaters. I'm willing to bet the hummus was just the hummus that they put out on the coffee table with some veggies for when guests arrived. We'll just bring that to the table. Look, that's part of your meal. I seem to be in the minority though. Most people on Reddit said the OP was not the asshole. Even apparently vegans who are like, I would never expect more than this. And I'm not saying that the OP is an asshole. They obviously cared enough to try to seek some clarification. Although I will say, I feel like a lot of people just post AITAs hoping to get a tidal wave of validation. And it seems like in her mind, she did think she was doing the right thing. She did think she was considering her friend. And if I were the friend, would I have said something right then and there? Probably not, but it also would have been painfully obvious to everyone that this was a completely unsatisfying meal. And then all of those guests at the party would look at the sad, scrappy meal the vegan is eating and be like, see, this is why I could never go vegan. I'd just be too hungry. And this is the problem with how so many carnists perceive a vegan diet, is they just think of a meal that they would currently eat without the meat and without the animal products, and they're like, ooh, that seems sad and boring. And I'm like, yeah, that's because the entire meal was centered around a carcass. People suggested Alina should have clarified the menu ahead of time, but then that would have been seen as rude, which is why there's so many situations where you really just can't win as a vegan. Try to get clarification ahead of time, you're seen as rude or controlling. Don't clarify and just trust the process, and you're fucking hungry. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And for more from me, you can check out my Patreon. All patrons get to join the Discord, which is basically a private live chat / forum community for my patrons. You can also get exclusive content at the Dinner Fork and Up tiers. And now let's move on to a real doozy of a headline. The Vegan Hunter. A bad breakup and a love for nature inspire a taste for eating meat. My ex-boyfriend was always trying to get me to eat his meat. Shockingly, this isn't a euphemism. Whoa, we got some edgy writing. We got a real edgelord over here. He was a hunter. I was a vegan. Hunting was important to him, and he wanted to share it with me. I think we can all see where this is going. This is such an ex-vegan tale as old as time that Disney may as well make an animated movie about it. Vegan pick-me dating a meat eater. Abandons her beliefs. He breaks up with her anyway. Now she stands for nothing. Carney, please pick me. Not my preferred key, but had to go with the karaoke version. When I met him, it had been a dozen years since I'd read Eating Animals. And yes, the only thing more embarrassing than being a vegan is being a vegan because Jonathan Safran Foer told you to. Like his, my reasons were related to factory farming and global warming, to suffering and compassion, to being the kind of person you want to be. Yeah, what an embarrassing list of reasons. Who wants to be any of those? They were pretty good reasons now that I think about it, and I still believe in them. Oh, but let me guess, now you've just twisted your hunting narrative to somehow still fit with those. Eating only meat that he personally killed was the second thing he told me about himself. The first was that he knew how to clean a skull. One of my Hinge prompt answers was about trying to clean the flesh off a skull I found in the desert. I told him that I know how to clean a skull was the sexiest thing he could have said to me, and that if you were going to eat meat, hunting it yourself seemed like the way to do it. Carney, please pick me. I'll spare you the details, but they then have what seems to be quite a tumultuous relationship. He gets in trouble for hunting without a permit and also breaks up with her. She then decides, despite being a vegan who lives deep within New York City, that she wants to start hunting. Completely unrelated to the breakup, I'm sure. There's this gem of her talking about her first hunting experience. We'd be hunting with dogs, which seemed good on a vibes level. Yeah, what could be better vibes than having a living animal with you while you unalive other animals? Rock solid logic, can't argue with it. I'll spare you the hunting details because they're completely nauseating, but I will say her account of her hunting trip is full of so much contradiction and cognitive dissonance that I honestly don't know who to feel more sorry for, this person who is so clearly lacking a sense of self, or the innocent animals she killed. I just hated everything about this article, starting with the stupid fucking clickbait title. And you know how there's times when you hear about a person or you meet a person and you're just like, oh, God, I'm just so happy to live in a world that this person also lives in. I'll just say my feelings toward this author are the opposite. Let's move on to a bit of a lighter one. Miss Manners. An uninvited vegan snooped in my refrigerator and insulted my cheese. If I wrote a letter to Miss Manners anytime someone insulted my cheese, I'd need to start a GoFundMe to pay for all the postage stamps. And vegans are snowflakes? They insulted my cheese! Dear Miss Manners, am I the one who is in the wrong here? When I invited friends to a dinner recently, I was shamed and criticized about what I was serving. One of my friends invited another guest to join us, and it turns out he is a very strict vegan. I wasn't even aware that he was coming. Prior to dinner, this fussy / picky guest realized that I was serving chicken with orange orange sauce and honey. He then opened my refrigerator and said, I see ricotta, buttermilk, cottage cheese, milk, mozzarella, half and half butter, and heavy cream. Then he slammed the door shut and remarked, someone needs to teach you how to shop more humanely. What's wrong with me and my shopping? Or should I cultivate new friends? Miss Manners' response was pretty lame. She basically was just like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your shopping. You should get new friends. Furthermore, if the reader really wanted to know what's wrong with their shopping, you could always ask the person who said that to you. They'd give you a much more honest and informative answer than Miss Manners, but something tells me you don't want an honest answer, which is why you're asking Miss Manners instead of Google. Next up, don't bother going vegan to save the planet. Do this instead. Opinion. Oh really, this is an opinion piece? You don't say. This headline pisses me off because, as we know, many people just read headlines. And that quick confirmation bias of, oh, okay, don't need to go vegan? Got it. Is all they need. As a researcher at MIT working on energy technologies, I've spent many late nights in the lab digging into whether any of the widely touted personal approaches are making much of a difference. And sadly, research shows that many of the climate actions we have embedded into our daily lives are only marginally beneficial. It talks about plastic recycling being ineffective, which, okay, sure. We could go vegan, but plant-based foods can still have a large environmental impact. By the way, that hyperlink goes to a BBC article that claims vegan diets are less sustainable due to the environmental impact of things like avocados, nuts, and berries. You know, foods that only vegans eat. Indeed, if everyone in the US went vegan, the country's greenhouse gas emissions would decrease by only 2.6%, according to researchers at the US Department of Agriculture. The link here doesn't have anything to do with USDA research, and to be honest, I didn't dive into all the research to verify or disprove this number, because this is what the fork headlines, not a scientific deep dive. But according to the journal Climate, if we all went vegan, the world's food-related CO2 emissions could drop by 68% within 15 years. The author continues, we need systemic change to ensure our individual climate actions aren't going to waste. If you're serious about fighting climate change this year, instead of recycling more, consider shifting focus to policy support and investments. My response to these types of claims is, why not both? Why can't we incorporate individual action in addition to policy support? Oh, I think I know why. Because you're addicted to cheese and steak and you don't want to admit it. I'm not saying that's the case for this author specifically, but anecdotally, in my opinion, the people who say these types of things are people who want to intellectualize their way out of the reality that they just don't want to stop eating certain things for selfish reasons. In my opinion, this sentiment and this headline is a harmful appeal to futility, and it had me saying, what the fork? The next headline is from The Telegraph, the anti-vegan backlash that made Britain fall back in love with meat. And yes, this did seem to be a Valentine's Day themed article. Meat is making a comeback. After a dismal few years for carnivores who felt constantly judged by an army of virtue-signaling vegans, veganism now seems to be in sharp decline. They referenced a study that said more 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK are increasing their meat intake than reducing it, but again, I couldn't find that study. But sure, they reference veganuary slowing down in the UK even though it's growing worldwide, and they talk about the decline in vegan meat sales, which is always a big talking point for veganism being on the decline, even though, as I discussed in a previous video, even though plant meat sales have declined, plant food sales have actually increased overall. So, have we really escaped the clutches of the vegan cult? Well, apparently not. The party is most definitely over, asserts Hamish Renton, CEO of food and drink consultancy HRA Global. We had the boom, now this is the correction. Food has always been a fashion, and this is a prime example. Clive Black, retail analyst at investment group Shore Capital, concurs, we've dabbled with craziness and come back to common sense. This guy's name might be Clive Black, but he has some pretty colorful quotes. The problem is that most of this stuff tastes absolutely crap. The complexity of alternative proteins is immense compared to the simplicity of natural meat proteins. It masqueraded as something that's good for the environment, animals, and you, but it's actually the opposite of a holy trinity. It's a holy nightmare. I give him credit for his creative linguistics, but saying all these ridiculous things as though they're fact, I can't take him seriously. Most of this stuff tastes absolutely crap. Like, tell me you tried a garden burger once in 2004 and haven't tried plant-based meat since. The article shares a few other completely realistic anecdotes, like nutrition health coach Daniela Edkins became a vegan in her early 20s in 2014, inspired by Australian social media influencers. Stop. That tells me everything I need to know. Oh, you mean before her frontal cortex was fully developed, she consumed way too high saturation bowls of smoothies and fruit and then claimed she was hungry and lethargic, and then followed the ex-vegan curriculum to a T by secretly eating salmon and claiming an immediate life-changing difference? Sounds about right. The article continues with cherry-picked interviews with people who are clearly incredibly biased against vegans, making ridiculous sweeping statements. It does surprisingly end with at least a little bit of a more positive sentiment. This likely isn't the end for veganism. Renton predicts a new version of plant-based food will come along soon using natural ingredients as the base rather than chemically enhanced fast food. Lentils and beans and chickpeas and tofu and tempeh are like, I've been here the whole time, bro. And a spokesperson for Waitrose, one of the biggest supermarkets in the UK, also notes that it has seen an increase in sales of plant-based products from ingredients for scratch cooking to ready meals in their stores. So again, we have confirmation of plant-based food sales actually increasing overall. So what was it about that sharp decline you mentioned earlier? Don't worry, our friend Clive gets the last word. However, Black thinks this particular trend will never see such giddy heights again. Veganism is back in its proportionate box. Okay, Clive, whatever you say. And then there was another headline related to this article, blame vegans for the anti-vegan backlash, which was actually written by a vegan, another vegan flirting dangerously close to pick-me territory. Carney, please pick me. Just want to go over a couple points they make. If veganism is falling out of fashion, then vegans must take a fair amount of the blame. No, shan't. I've lost count of the number of times I've seen vegans try to convince people to go plant-based by telling them about all the fake meats, plant milks, and dairy-free cheeses they can buy these days, rather than helping them to make the philosophical shift that's necessary to take up this cruelty-free lifestyle. It's not just putting oat milk into your morning coffee and saying no to bacon. It's also avoiding all forms of animal cruelty. You won't get someone to adopt that philosophy and way of living by appealing to their tummy. You can only do it by speaking to their heart. So the main thrust of this person's argument is that the vegan movement focuses too much on food and not enough on animal rights. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who agree, maybe some of you guys even agree. But I have come to believe, personally, that any person who claims to know the best form of activism is wrong. I think there's so much hubris in criticizing other methods of activism and claiming as a fact that yours is best. What I've learned is that everyone is different. Like, some people need to be led by the food aspect and then everything else comes later. I've met many vegans for whom this was the case. And it's like, yeah, no wonder so many people lead with food, because food is the main lifestyle component we're trying to get people to change. That's what's causing the most harm. And also, food is a much more palatable topic, no pun intended, than animal rights. I'd say many carnists would be open to hearing about delicious vegan alternatives, but not very open when it comes to the hardcore ethical stuff. And again, like I said before, why can't we have both? Why can't both exist? Why can't both be important? Why do we have to, criticize and bash one method over the other? I just think these types of arguments are so divisive, and we don't need divisiveness within the vegan movement. I think the wisest people in the world know that they don't know everything. So I very much disagree with this author's sentiment, but I'd love to know what you guys think. And that's all the What the Fork headlines for today. Let me know what you thought of them. Let me know what you thought of this format in general. Sometimes when I do more negative leaning videos, people get frustrated and they're like, let's just focus on the positive stuff, which I obviously agree with and love doing. But I also think it's important to acknowledge all the different ways veganism is represented in the media, because I think we can learn a lot from it. About what people's biases are, about where their blind spots are, about the work we still have to do in educating people. I know I have non-vegan viewers on my channel, and I have heard feedback that watching my videos has caused them to think about things differently and even go vegan. So that's it for today. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed, hit subscribe. Patreon and Purple Carrot discount links will be below. Thank you so much to my Fancy Fork patrons, Claudia, Dindin Masker, and Big Chungus 4526. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!